Mein Name ist Ivo Meinzen. Ich bin Korrespondent der Neuen Zürcher Zeitung und bin heute hier, um dieses Panel zu moderieren. EU-Erweiterung, eine geopolitische Notwendigkeit. EU-Enlargement, geopolitical necessity. As most of our panelists are not German speaking, I will now switch to English. And we have about 1.5 hours in front of us that will hopefully provide some answers to the challenges and opportunities facing the European Union in its enlargement and neighborhood policy. It is a good moment to do this. There's a lot of things happening. Last week we had good news on Albania. This week we had slightly trickier news this morning from Moldova with the vote on putting EU accession into the constitution of the country. I'm not sure how many of you have followed this morning, but 50-50, 50.17, I believe, in the end. So very tight. It shows that the geopolitical stakes of this enlargement process have increased in the last 2.5 years. There have been new impulses, but also new challenges. And we saw that this also creates some political struggles in the candidate countries themselves. So to address this, we have a wonderful panel, and unfortunately my panelists will have to wait another moment, but I think they're seated comfortably, I hope. And first of all, I would therefore like to welcome Caroline Edstadler on stage. For the past few years, she has been Austria's federal minister for the EU and the Constitution, and in this function she has actively developed her country's traditionally strong role, especially in the Western Balkans. And please, Minister Edstadler, looking forward to your speech.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear panelists, a very warm welcome to my hometown, Salzburg. It's such a pleasure for me being here today at the 20th anniversary of this Salzburg Europe Summit. And allow me at the outset to congratulate the former regional governor, Franz Schausberger, and his team for organizing this conference yearly in the most beautiful city of Austria. The conference and the discussions which will take place today are a very good opportunity and come at the right time to discuss European topics here in Salzburg in this wonderful setting. And I have one quote from Hugo von Hofmannsthal. He said, "Salzburg is the heart of Europe." So there is no better place to discuss also the most pressing issue of the European Union, which is the enlargement of the European Union. Against the backdrop of the challenging time in which we are living against the backdrop of the Russian aggression towards Ukraine, the escalating violation in the Middle East, the beginning of a new legislative cycle within the European Union, it's time to discuss this issue. And it's the right impetus for this discussion on how to meet these challenges for all of us, for the ones who are already within the European Union and for the candidate countries. On the 1st of May this year, we celebrated the so far largest round of EU accession, 10 member states who joined the European Union on the 1st of May 2004, and they were followed by Bulgaria and Romania in 2007 and by Croatia in 2013. And also Austria has something to celebrate because it's the 30th anniversary of concluding the accession negotiations here, and then we became a member of the European Union. And we clearly have to say, we benefited a lot from being full member in the European Union, of course regarding security, but also regarding prosperity. And Austria is an export country, and around 70% of our foreign trade takes place within the European Union, and the exports to other member states are 4 times higher than before we were a member of the European Union. And of course, there are a lot of chances also when we are looking to the region of the Western Balkans. A lot of companies from Austria are working there and using their opportunities. And at the same time, we must not forget that the region of the Western Balkans, the 6 countries of the Western Balkans, are waiting for around 20 years now, and we now have to do it very constructively and together with them to bring them forward, to bring them closer to the European Union. But mentioning this criticism, which is of course clear while it is there, we also have to see that we reached a lot within the last years. And I was presented as someone who has been Minister for the EU since January 2020. Well, I am still Minister of the EU, and maybe we bring more things forward until the end of the year when we are expecting then to have a new government. But if I compare the atmosphere in the General Affairs Council, where I represent Austria since January 2020, then and now, then there was a tremendous positive development going on. At the beginning of my term, I asked for all the General Affairs Council meeting for an AOP regarding enlargement, and especially for the Western Balkan countries. And sometimes I had 1 or 2 countries who supported me in that regard. Now, it is completely common sense that, of course, the enlargement has to take place. It's not a question if, it's only a question how we could better assist the candidate countries to become a full member of the European Union. And we also have to be very honest. It is very often the pressure from outside that brings things forward. The beginning of the Russian war of aggression towards Ukraine brought the enlargement of the European Union in the spotlight, and it gave a sense of urgency and moral imperative in the EU discourse. And if we only look at the positive things, then this, I would say, is a positive development. In June, the IGCs formally to open the accession negotiations with Ukraine and Moldova took place. And this was a significant milestone and a very important political signal. And it shows also the commitment of the serious reforms, which are painful ones and which have to be done by the politicians in the countries and have to be explained also to the people living there. I myself traveled to Kiev in November 2022 with 8 female ministers from the European Union and from Liechtenstein. We traveled to Moldova in March 2023 because it was important for me to see the situation on the ground, to get a feeling how people are dealing with the accession process, how they are seeing the future, and they are strongly committed. They really want to become member of the European Union. And now it's the time to use this window of opportunity. And Austria always was a great supporter of the Western Balkan countries, and we must not forget on them. It's really that we have to use the enlargement as a geopolitical tool in this challenging moment in history and continue to make a tangled process towards the EU integration. I would like to highlight that also with the great support of Austria and of our Chancellor Karl Nehammer, we could open the accession process with Bosnia and Herzegovina in March 2024. I just took part in the second IGC with Albania last week on Tuesday in Luxembourg, and I had also the opportunity to attend the Berlin process, which also celebrated its 10th anniversary in Berlin. There was the invitation of Olaf Scholz, and also the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, was there, and it is really positively seen by all of them, and I don't have to tell you that all the 6 Western Balkan countries have also been represented by their prime ministers or presidents. So let's continue this path, and let's do something I also already discussed also in the audience, to use the gradual integration. The gradual integration was an idea of Austria to focus on the positive things, to give politicians of the candidate country also the opportunity to sit at the table in Brussels, in Luxembourg, in Strasbourg, wherever, and to discuss, to be part of the discussion when we are thinking of the future of the European Union, and we could really accompany these countries even better with this gradual integration. And one thing is clear, I always say, help us to help you. We can accompany you, we can assist you, we can be there in motivating you, keeping our promises from the European Union side, but we cannot do the reforms for you. So the reforms have to be done in the countries, and to support the politicians also when it comes to the atmosphere in the countries, I think the gradual integration is a perfect way of showing incentives already on the path to the European Union. The goal has to stay to be a full member of the European Union. And in some cases, I think this will take longer. In some cases, I think we can already see results, for example, when it comes to Montenegro. We discussed it also before we came to this room. I think Montenegro could be the 28th member state of the European Union in 2028, could be followed by Albania, where we see also a lot of impetus towards this direction. And this is not only good for the European Union and for these specific countries, but it's also good for the whole region, and I think it will be a great motivation. Let's keep this process a merit-based process. I think in the meantime it is also clear it is not a race who will become the next member state, but it is something where we have to look at the reforms. We need same criteria and the same procedures for all the countries, and of course it's depending on the reforms which are done in these countries. Let me conclude by saying once more that all sides will benefit for an even stronger European Union. Think back of May 2004. We are now much stronger than we have been before this large round of enlargement. And to conclude it in maybe one sentence, I would again stress that it is our responsibility to show that the EU remains open and attractive to all countries, willing to undertake necessary reforms. Together, we can build a strong, stable and united Europe. And even if we know that not everyone is interested to have a strong and stable, future-oriented European Union, it is even more our responsibility to do our utmost to be strong, also compared to other countries who are not democratic ones and who want maybe even destroy the European Union. Let's use this time, and a good luck to all the representatives of the Western Balkan countries and Ukraine and Moldova, and of course I would also like to name Georgia, which is in the row. I'm happy that you are here, I'm happy that you are that engaged, and we are here for you. We will push further on the European side, and we will stay your friends. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your speech, Minister. We are supposed to now go live to Kiev. I'm hearing that there is some technical problems at the moment. So we will, I apologize in advance to our panelists that if this line happens, I will maybe have to interrupt one of you somewhat rudely. I'm just hearing through this button that keeps falling out of my ear that we are actually live now. So, Olha Stefanishina, Minister, can you hear us?
I hear you well. Do you hear me?
We hear you loud and clear. Laskavo prosimo v Salzburg.
Welcome. Thank you.
So, it's a great pleasure to have you, and thanks for making time. Olha Stefanishina is Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister for European and Atlantic Integration, and since September of this year, also the Minister of Justice. Ms. Stefanishina has worked mostly since 2007 in the government. She's very experienced in European and legal affairs. And I think it's no exaggeration to say that she is one of the main people responsible in Kiev right now for getting Ukraine ready for EU accession. Please have a warm applause.
Thank you so much.
Deputy Prime Minister, I think it's always good to be current with the news, and so I cannot but ask you about your opinion of what just happened in Moldova last night. Obviously, this is not Ukraine, but at the same time, Ukraine's EU ambitions are quite closely tied to Moldova's ambitions. So can you give us a brief statement what you think about this result and if this will have an effect on Ukraine's ambition?
Thank you so much. It's a very interesting question, and it's even more interesting given that just last week our delegation came back from Brussels after the bilateral negotiations with the EU on the functioning of democratic institutions. So, and I think that from this perspective, the elections in Moldova are even more important because Russia and Russian propaganda and Russian special services have not been specifically trying to hide their intention to influence the elections, to affect the elections, to fuel the political agenda. And I think that on the backslide of all this understanding, it's very important that we see that the elections have taken place, that the information is public, and the outcome of these elections is likely something that would allow to confirm that functioning of democratic institutions is in action in Moldova as well. I think from this perspective and from the perspective of your question of linking the Ukraine and Moldova in the enlargement process from the regional perspective is very important, and we're looking forward for the further developments. But I think the major angle on our side is that these are fair, democratic, open elections, which would have the outcome which will allow us to continue in the same Twix format as we were before.
Thank you very much. Ukraine, obviously in a quite different situation, nevertheless, than Moldova. You're a country that has a very clear majority of the population following the government in its EU ambitions in the path to the European Union. At the same time, you are in this accession process and you're trying to reform your country in the middle of a full-scale war. Can you tell a little bit about some of the obstacles on this path in your everyday work?
Well, I think one of the issues we do not have to forget that the results of the polls we have around the country on the support of the European integration of Ukraine or Ukraine's membership to EU, which is now like up to 90% of the Ukrainian population, is clearly standing for the European choice of Ukraine, with the others mostly hesitating whether it's important. So the way to have these polls was really very complicated. This has resulted to get us here, the revolutions and the war and the full-scale war we're facing right now, which is partially because Ukraine has dared to lead the country to its European origins and choose the way towards bringing ourselves back to the European family. So none of this polls should be taken for granted. And I remember very well the period of time before 2013 when the Revolution of Dignity started. We have a very divided society, and we had a very tough period period where we still were going through a rehab after the post-Soviet era, but we were not yet there in our understanding of our future and our perspectives. And we also know this feeling very well, but literally it's the blood, the pressure, and the Ukrainian society and Ukrainian people who have been building block by block every system of institutions, of values that we have now in our country. So of course, it was a natural decision to apply for membership, but it was also a natural decision to keep the same resolve in reforms agenda throughout the war, because for Ukraine, additionally to its European past, it's also literally the process that keeps the country alive, that confirms and proves that the country is a functioning, institutional, democratic country, and it has much more meaning now than before the full-scale invasion. But also it's a very serious impetus to Ukrainian authorities to move ahead with the bold and very systemic decisions in terms of reforms. And it, of course, would not be possible without decision to start the accession process for Ukraine, the accession talks. And I'm really happy that EU, a part of Ukraine contributing to EU security and have created this momentum for enlargement. European Union plays a serious role in mobilizing Ukrainian society, keeping us together and concentrated on two major issues, the victory of Ukraine, but also European democratic country, which we want to see after the war is over.
Can you, when you talk about reforms, of course, there's so many, and I mean, as far as I see, there's thousands of laws that Ukraine has to change to approach the European Union. But can you maybe name one reform that you would say is maybe the most important one? And could you also talk about one reform that you would say is the most challenging for Ukraine at this point?
Well, it's kind of very complicated question because I have many decisions in my head already. I would probably put three examples. One example which really has shown how the market economy is working. All Ukrainian legislative and institutional framework is fully aligned with the EU regulations, which really literally serves as the element of our resilience. And without being able to join the ENSOE, the European electricity grid, we could not even start imagining what kind of winters we would have since the war started. So, and it would not be possible without almost a decade of legal and institutional transformations, which were not like obvious before the moment has come. Second, I think it's the mental transformation, and it has been a decision to ratify the Istanbul Convention on fight against domestic violence. You know that this convention has been surrounded by different conspiracy about gender identity and many other things, but this was the momentum when all people from different political and ideological camps united over something which is really more important. But I think the most challenging is the transformation of the administrative institutions and of the mindset. You can put in force a lot of good legislation, but the spirit and the sense of their implementation should be in the hearts and the minds of those public servants who implement that. So I think that the major challenge would be to build the public administration capacity, which would also be implementing the legislation in the spirit of the will of the people, but also in the spirit of European values.
And I mean, of course, we talk about institutional capacity as well, right? I mean, you have a state service, you have an administration that is also weakened by the war because many people have gone away, are not there. The Ukrainian institutions were maybe not the strongest before the war. So how do you deal with that, to create this institutional capacity to actually implement these reforms?
I think one of the reasons why Ukraine has applied for EU membership on the fourth day of the war is because we have managed to develop a very solid ground for transformation, and we wanted to set in stone as in a book of Ukraine statehood. We didn't know what would happen to my country the days after, so we wanted to capture in this application all the solid background we managed to develop before the full-scale war started. And I think this capacity, this is also the instrument of the capacity, because we had the legislative framework which allowed us to pass through necessary legislation, but I always refer to Ukrainian civil society and Ukrainian people. They have been acting with Ukrainian government with one front at every step of the way since the accession process started. We prepared together all the documents, we had the discussions, and everybody were mobilized over that. So when we're speaking about like 90%, it's not only 90% of those who have a desire, it's also 90% of those who stand up and do something on their own. Somebody were doing the advocacy, somebody were doing the communication, somebody were drafting the legislation, and somebody were preparing the data. And it was done together in a synergy between public institutions, international experts, foreign governments, even EU governments has been supporting Ukraine, but also, of course, the civil society, think tanks, and expert community. And up to date now, when we have put into a legal framework the choreography of the negotiating process with the EU, it is now part of the legal mechanism. How do we conduct negotiations? Only through a dialogue, inclusiveness, and joint effort.
Mm-hmm. If we change the perspective a little bit for the last couple of questions, what would you say? I mean, Ukraine is a very large country. It's a very important country. If it becomes a member of the EU, how will it change the European Union?
Well, I think the answer to this question is in your question. So Ukraine is a large country and a very important country. So EU will become larger and more important.
Final question, because we have here on the panel a lot of representatives also from the Western Balkans, and of course they are also waiting for EU membership. And there is, of course, some fears among some of them that with such a big and important country also applying for EU membership, that maybe their interests will be coming second, or that there is like a competition between these countries. What do you say to the countries in the Western Balkans?
Well, I would only urge for development of this kind of narrative. It's also my utmost desire for these countries to succeed in their efforts to join the European Union. And I think the only one very important thing we all should remember, that basically Ukraine has already made a very important input into the enlargement. We have opened the new energy of this process, and basically all of us, all the enlargement country, in a very dynamic process. Every country like Bosnia, Herzegovina, Albania, all the other countries have had a new start in their dynamics of accession, and some of them are ahead of us, some of them are at the same level. I don't think that it's really even worth of thinking this way. We have to together to make sure that this energy is in place, that the enlargement is not slowing down, that the enlargement is a continuous element of the strength of the European Union. We should not forget that basically new European Commission formed right now would have two major areas of their priorities. This is the enlargement and preparation of European Union to enlargement, but secondly, it's also security and defense policy. And I think this is a perfect reflection of the priorities in Europe right now. And I have always been reassuring my colleagues in the Western Balkan countries, in Moldova, as well, that whatever is needed on Ukrainian side will be done to make sure that all of us succeed to the extent we can, and we have to at this point of time in history, because the windows of the opportunity in history are not opening very often, and this period of time is vital for all of our countries, and whatever we can do to stay dynamic together, we have to do.
Thank you so much, Vice Prime Minister, and all the best to Kiev. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David.
Dear panelists, finally we are back here on stage, and I would like to now introduce you to the audience. I will start with Minister Gorcevic, Montenegro's Minister of European Affairs since December 2023, specialist in civil law. You have worked in various positions, served as an advisor to the Prime Minister on issues like minorities, and have also sat in government commissions in the field of human rights. Thank you so much for being in Salzburg.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, actually.
To my right, I have Marie-Janine Kalik. She's a professor of East and Southeast European history at the University of Munich. Away from her permanent employment, she worked in various institutions like the Special Coordinator of the Stability Pact and the UNPRO4 headquarters in Zagreb and the ICTY. Esteemed expert on the Balkans, publisher, author of many books. Thanks for coming here. I will continue on my left with Šime Erlić, born in the Croatian city of Zadar. He has been the country's Minister of Regional Development and EU funds since January of last year. As an economist, he has worked on various development projects in his home regions. And in the last 10 years, his efforts have mostly been dedicated on investments and funds from the EU and their use in Croatia. Thank you. Welcome. To my right, Dr. Hannes Mösenbacher, Chief Risk Officer of the Austrian Raiffeisenbank International, holds a doctorate in social and economic sciences from the University of Vienna. He has worked at Raiffeisen for 16 years, I believe that's correct, I hope. And since 2017, you've also been a member of the board of directors, and his bank is, of course, quite a very strong actor in Central and Eastern Europe. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We also have, all the way on the right, Josef Brkic, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs in Bosnia and Herzegovina since April 2015. In his function, he's also responsible for cooperation with NATO, and he holds university degrees in both law and European studies. And as a native of Mostar, he represents the Croats in the federal government of his country. Welcome. And last but not least, we have Christian Schmidt, the High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina for over 3 years now. Prior to this, he was a member of the German Bundestag and a federal minister. The lawyer, by training, has dealt with the Western Balkans as an advisor and rapporteur to various bodies since the early 1990s. Welcome to Salzburg. Mr. Schmidt, I will start with you because you have to leave in a little bit. So you're, of course, somebody who has followed the dynamics of EU enlargement very closely in recent years and decades. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how, to what extent, from your perspective in Bosnia and Herzegovina, how important are the signals that are coming from outside, from other countries? And I do think we could return maybe back to Moldova one more time quickly. Moldova, Albania, these developments in the last week, do they affect the discussion in Bosnia-Herzegovina, or is that not that important?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mitzens. Thank you that I have the opportunity just to do something like Dr. Schausberger has raised yesterday, the good relation between Salzburg and Munich, as I have to be present in Munich this afternoon. So, and having some limitation to Schengen opportunities, one has to be careful to get there in time. Thank you very much for having the understanding. If you allow, I would answer to this in not in my actual position, but as a broader understanding as somebody observing the situation and the political framework. I would say the result in Moldova gives us confidence, if I look to Maya Sandu, but is an alarming signal that if we would understand that this, let me say, this input of having geostrategical and geopolitical approach to enlargement, as well is a game changer. It is not just to put again Bosnia-Herzegovina and the other member states of the Western Balkans on the agenda. We could talk why it was that European Union has, and the political structures in the member states did not really support a fast development in the last 10 years. So take this as an opportunity on behalf of the Western Balkans, but don't take this only as an opportunity just to put it on the table. Take it as an important indication that there is a need to have a fast answer to this. What I, in German terms would say, es geht darum, dass wir das Haus winterfest machen müssen. This is that today, if I'm right, the German Minister of Defense and NATO is opening a new tactical headquarters for the Baltic Sea in Rostock, following as well the insight we have got in just coming to the country I have served as minister, that we have to read that there's an estimation that it needs 4 to 6 years for Russia to be able to act as well militarily in not stopping at the Donbass. This is not that I would say this is the danger coming up, but let me add, 2007 Munich Security Conference, Vladimir Putin delivered a speech. Did we listen to the speech? If you are rereading the speech, there's not that much surprise about what is happening now. What are we doing now? Kidding a little bit about whether Bosnia-Herzegovina makes its case in several laws. Josip Brkic could tell a lot about how much of commitment it needs to convince some in the political responsible class, but this is not the issue. I would say the issue I see is that we have to see that in the next, should I say 5 to 6 years, we have to make very clear that there is something which is more than the estimated wonderful approach of European Commission to negotiate chapter 1 to chapter 35. Important, wonderful, necessary, not easier, merit-based, necessary. Experiences are here on the panel and there very much. But what is there a need for additional answer? And this is what I'm looking for. I was very happy to hear again Minister Edstadler talking about this step-by-step approach, if I may say. We have to work on this. What does this mean? What are the tools we can offer to say first, you already belong to us. You are not an applicant just waiting to be in, be it Ukraine or be it Moldova or be it Western Balkan countries, but what can we offer? If you allow hearing your conversation with the Vice Prime Minister, it came to this, what I think last year we discussed at this on another panel, what is the need for having a full membership of European Union in the terms of the Lisbon Treaty fully done. This includes the Copenhagen criteria. They are very, very important and strong ones, and there is not that much possibility just to go off. But if this takes a longer time, do we have the geostrategical time to wait, or do we have find intermediate solutions? My plea, and we have heard today and this morning a very important and impressive speech of the Prime Minister of Northern Macedonia. For me, you allow, this is not my private position, this is our problem. We are putting us into structures and ideas, and that we do not come out. And there has sometimes somebody to say, friends, there has been a game changer. And this game changer is exactly that we are now sitting here and talking about geostrategical relation and importance of Bosnia-Herzegovina, of Northern Macedonia, of Montenegro, and the other member states of the Western Balkans. Security first. What about NATO? 3 of them are already member of the NATO. How can we organize European security? Economic issues, I think they should be manageable. And following the 3 key points Gio Hahn had presented this morning in his as well very remarkable speech, about to say what is the key. This is security, this is economy, and this is somehow integration in Europe. We can deliver 1 and 2. 1 is the most important, and first things first. So I would suggest that we go and have a look on what we can do to make sure that the people in this region knowing, and like in Ukraine, that we are both them and they are part of us, and not just in the lobby, as we have heard the wording today about Northern Macedonia. So,
but your plea goes towards creating levels of membership formats where countries can participate without being full members. And
I'm very sure I will not make friends in the European Commission on this idea. But I think we have to talk about this. We cannot continue like we continued since 20 years. So we have to be creative, and this is one of the advantages of European Union, as I'm counting on the new Commission, the new period, that there will be a lot of ideas.
Do you see a dilemma, and I'm sure we can talk about this afterwards as well with you, Mr. Birkic. I mean, do you see a dilemma between, on the one hand, the disappointment that everything takes so long of people in the region, but on the other hand, also a general disinclination to become members of a second class, right? Because that's the discussion often too. It's like, okay, now, like the neighborhood policy of the last 15 years, this is just you're in a different room, but you're never actually going to join the room because then the political pressure isn't there anymore.
I would say we cannot correct probably the mistakes, if we could name it, or the misleading understanding of the last 20, 30 years. But we have the opportunity to make it better now. This needs a lot of communication. I think there is a possibility for European Union as well to communicate more, and a little bit to put charge on the political responsible people in the countries just on the way to be member of European Union. Sometimes this is a mechanism I know from my own time as a national minister of a member state of European Union, and the government you're attending sometimes to blame European Union to have decided things you never would do. Sometimes you find that it was not that much resistance against this, but you can put the responsibility to anybody else. I would see that this process as well could be changed a little bit in these membership negotiation process. And what means negotiations about memberships in acquis communautaire, we all know that basically this is more adapting the national legislation to the acquis communautaire instead of negotiating the acquis communautaire. So there is as well more to deliver from the member state, from the future member states, and I think this can be communicated. It's not easy, I see, and we have to avoid to say the final status would be in the second classroom. But better you going from the lobby into a place which is has a roof, has a heating, and has something to supply, instead of just waiting for the glorious day of membership if it takes longer than these 4 to 6 years. If it's in, it's wonderful.
Mr. Birkic, I would love to invite you to reply if, you know, this idea of a partial membership, is this actually something that you see as an alternative?
Thank you very much. First, politeness, and to thank Professor Salzburg for inviting me. Congratulations to his team for the first 20 years of the Institute. And thanks for all of those who are supporting the work of the Institute, because the main principles of the subsidiarity, which they are promoting very strong, is one of the principles which is, you know, very palpable for the citizens of the EU and the neighboring candidate countries. Now let's make things straight. Name of the game is full membership. Full stop. There is no buts. Today, you don't have to, from the legal point of view, change a single comma in the fundamental treaties of the EU to accept countries, including all of the countries of the Western Balkans. We are collateral beyond of our not readiness to do the homework of the reforms that needs to be done in order to, you know, meet Copenhagen criteria, of another conditionality, which is the acceptance or absorption capacity of the EU. And I can only sign and echo what the Prime Minister of North Macedonia, and you could see the level of frustration there. I can understand him as a politician. I can understand him as a citizen of this region, how, you know, long time and painful is to be asked reform after reform, change name after change name, but stuck in the mud up to your knees when it comes to the integration. We need something palpable for the integration process for every single country of the Western Balkans. And of course, yes, we are supporting the European perspective of Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia as well. I'll go and give you actually it's a living fact. For the past 10 years, 9.5, I'm a deputy foreign minister. Then we decided in 2015 that we are going to apply for the membership to the EU. And it was make it happen in February 2016 under the Dutch presidency of the EU. You can imagine how ecstatic was Dutch foreign minister when we knocked on the door and said, we want to give you a piece of paper signed saying we are applying for the membership. What happened after? After it happened that the continued Russian aggression to Ukraine, which did not start in 22, it started in 2014 with the annexion of Crimea, put a new light on the enlargement, not within the countries of the Western Balkans, but in Brussels. We were always there, standing ready for the next step, to prove that this region, which is a kitchen garden of the European Union, take the map and see, we are the kitchen garden of the European Union, is ready to make steps towards the membership. And all of us are equally Europeans by our historical, social, cultural, religious background, you name it. So, name of the game must be full membership. I'm the one who is understanding the realpolitik and that the things are not, ideal, especially in the politics. We would accept that this interim phase of fading in can be a phase, but with a concrete end date. This is not something which is not unusual for the EU. A couple of countries had an end date for their negotiations. We as the region can do. I have my, doubts. Are we still sailing regatta, like all the countries of the region, which is the modus operandi in approach to the EU, or it's going to be, decision once when the things are mature within the EU, politically mature, to accept new member states. About our integration in certain areas of the single market, we are, I would say, very, very, strongly integrated and, being the part of it. Financial sector is one of them. Raiffeisen, but also other banks are, doing a great job there. And it's integrated. But the political integration and our seat at the council table must be fulfilled based on the Thessaloniki promise, not to be coupled with the necessary talks on how to change decision-making within the European Union. We could hear our colleagues this morning when they were discussing about the willingness or reluctance to change unanimity or to change, qualified majority voting, including the common foreign security policy, which is something where you could find, common ground. The name of the game is full membership, full stop.
So there is obviously frustration, understandably, which we heard this morning as well. Is it a trust issue as well? I mean, when you're saying there's a worry that, if you have, that you're in principle for this phasing in, but at the same time, there's never, you have to still be sure that the end is full membership. So is there a loss of trust in Brussels in your country and in other countries of the region, would you say?
Actually, the fact that, the time, which is, as it was rightly pointed out by the Prime Minister this morning, it's a quarter of the century. 25 years from Zagreb Summit. We have, this promise, which was spilled over on the Council conclusions in Thessaloniki 2003. Only one country made it. That was the Republic of Croatia. And it was not easy, even for them. And that was 11 years ago. This is the biggest time span that EU did not enlarge. EU, with every enlargement, was a stronger in many aspects, not to advocate there. But when you leave time without any palpable things, then you have thirds, either the countries, the regions, or the ideologies that would use the opportunity and, try to pick up on their narrative, because the politics is not a vacuum. If values of the EU don't deeply enroot into the Western Balkans, others will. That's it. We only have to, on both sides, to deliver, and that this 2030, which seems to me as a reasonable date, but it was not the first date that it was mentioned. When Commissioner Hahn was the commissioner for the enlargement, we had 2015 as the date for Montenegro. 2025, sorry, as the date for Montenegro. And a lot of dates were, floating on the table. But we should, as our Trans-American said, put the money where your mouth are. We should prove that this part of the region, this kitchen garden of European Union, should be integral part, not only of the single market, but also of the EU as the best political organization, which is currently working on global scale.
Mr. Gorčević, I would like to turn to you also, because Montenegro has just been addressed, a country that some people say is likely the next member But yes, maybe in 2030. What kind of...
2028, actually. 2028.
2028. So Albania is 2030, I read somewhere maybe. But so, I mean, you've been in a process for 12 years now. So what's the atmosphere in your country? What does that do to people?
Well, 12 years, it's a really long period of time when you see like that. We had some great times when it comes to the enlargement, and we had some not great times at all. I can speak that only last year we had the technical mandate of the government, we didn't have the functional parliament, and we couldn't done anything regarding the EU integration in Montenegro. So now with the new government, and this is only 1 year of this government, we already have 2 IGCs, now hoping and searching to organize a third one in December where we can speak about the closing chapters as well. So at this moment, even the fact that there is frustration when it comes not only to Montenegro but all the Western Balkan countries, because it's not that we are waiting for too long. No, this process is very exhausting for all our administrations. This is something that is also very stressful. From the other hand, if we are speaking about Montenegro, which is a small country and we don't have enough administrative capacities to finish the process. And from the other hand, very optimistic looking from the Montenegrin side, because this is something that the EU values and EU path, we don't have a substitute. At this moment, we are working very, very hard, and that's why we got the first ever EBAR in June. That's why we now can speak about the closing chapters, and that's why we are very enthusiastic when it comes to the Montenegro. So, yes, I must add on this regarding the game that Josip is mentioning. I like your game definitely, because full membership is something that every one of us is searching, and this is when we speak about the issues that can be challenging for all of us. Yes, for each candidate countries, we can see the challenges in Moldova, we can see the challenges also Ukraine and other candidate countries, but also we can see in Montenegro that we are using the momentum when it comes not only the technical part of the negotiating process, but also the political will of the political parties inside Montenegro, the political will also of the member states and the European Commission from the other hand, because they are the partner in this process as well.
I would love to talk a little bit more about this, because I mean, one could argue Montenegro is an example of how domestic political change really can speed things up. You had Đukanović, who was certainly not the ideal Democrat for 30 years almost. You also had Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, maybe in 2022 as an impetus. So can you talk a little bit about what role do these factors play in speeding up an accession process, maybe?
Actually, everything is politics. Everything is politics. If you have the political will to finish the job when it comes to European integration, you can do it. And that's what we showed. In the first 100 days of this government, we showed that even the fact that we didn't have the 2/3 in the parliament, we had seated over the table not only the parliamentary majority, but with the opposition, and agreed what are the main goal for Montenegro. And the main goal for this government and also for the Montenegrin society is EU. So once in the first 100 days, we finished some for the judiciary names, because for some of them, for example, for the Supreme Prosecutor, we were waiting the appointment more than 7 years, and we couldn't find this political will over it. But when it comes to this is a must, so we can have this for the EU integration, then everything changed. So the things that united all the political parties in Montenegro is definitely the European path. It's something that we had, for example, for the EBAR. We had 12 EBAR laws that were voted not only from the parliamentary majority, but also from the opposition political parties in the parliament. And those are the things when you have everyone on board, government, NGOs, parliament, all the civil society and everyone working so hard, this is the key for the success. So in that way, I'm certain that also, when you mentioned the Russian aggression in Ukraine, yes, this is one of the moments when the member states sees this as one of the opportunity that the enlargement is very important from the security issues for the EU. And this is something that is also pushing the candidate countries also, so the member states are not blocking this enlargement from their side, because this is a game where it's not only that it's affecting and depending from the candidate countries, but also from the member states, European Commission, and everyone else. So this is actually a game where we need two for tango, actually. So in that manner, the puzzle is that political will inside the candidate country, in this case Montenegro, for one hand, and from the other hand also that the enlargement is very important and well seen and supported from the member states as well. So with these two situations, we have the good example that Montenegro now is the front runner, and that we really now can speak after 7 years that we can now close 4 chapters in December.
Merlic, you're a step ahead. Croatia, last country to join the EU 11 years ago. If you look back on this, I mean, and also in light of what we heard, was this Croatia that made more reforms than other country that put it in a position to become a member? Or were you just kind of lucky that enlargement fatigue wasn't as big yet in 2013?
Well, I would say that there's always a question of more things, more conditions that were in place back then, before 2013, when we were eager to join the European Union. But I have to draw a little bit back, because I want to show our willingness of political establishment to go to the European Union. That goes back even after the Homeland War, after the 90s, that was very turbulent in Croatia, obviously, and devastations. We were dedicated to rebuilding the country, but it was the strong commitment of Croatian people to go for the West, to go for the European Union, to integrate. So after the 2013 and integration, first of all, we used everything that we could in pre-accession period. And to answer your questions, I think that we were on a wave in time when European Union was still open for the enlargement process, but still we showed a really great willingness and dedication towards doing the reform back then and building up the capacities. In this term, lots of things has been done in Croatia, but when we entered the European Union in 2013, I would say that the progress is so obvious and so visible that it could really be seen from Mars, you know. In only 10 years, such a strong integration, so many benefits that we have experienced. We were practically at the same, more or less, situation like the Western Balkan countries in terms of GDP per capita, according to EU averages. But now when we see where we have come in only 10 or 11 years, that we were at 60% of the GDP per capita of the European Union averages, and now that we are 78, and that will soon 78% of the EU averages, and we'll soon be at the 80% of the EU averages. And when we see where the rest of the Western Balkans, so our neighboring countries, where we were jointly with them, now we see that a huge progress, and this instrument of enlargement that has a huge beneficial for the country. It's not just economical sense. It's not just integration in Schengen, in Eurozone. It's all together. It's going all together to put better conditions and living conditions. And now we can see it obviously with all of the statistics that the Croatians are living better today. Then we have full employment, record low unemployment, and Croatia changed for good. In a very short period of time. So when the entrance happened, the Croatian experience shows that it needed a much shorter time than maybe it was expected by other countries that the changes occur. So this could be a good example also for other countries right now from Western Balkans that are trying to join the European Union, and maybe we should believe, member states should put more belief into the enlargement process and to the countries. Due to their problems that they have, we are all aware of it, fragile political situations, due to all the circumstances that are against the enlargement, I think that there is no alternative to the enlargement. And this instrument of transformation that the enlargement have is key to make the stability in the region and in the European Union, and peace and stability. So there is no alternative to that. The Croatian experience also showed very well. So if we would draw conclusions from the Croatian experience, then we would say altogether, yes, go for the enlargement. But I think that there was certain things happening in the last 10 years that was different than when Croatia was trying to, different than when Croatia was entering into the European Union, that made the European Union more to deal with itself. Because after the joining in 2013, we have to be a little bit realistic and logical what happened. Lots of crises has hit the continent. Migration crisis, COVID crisis, now the energy crisis. Before that, I want to remember on Brexit, you know. So the European Union has its own problems. The member states, especially the more developed one, could not maybe see the clear advantage of the more enlargement, because especially when we are talking from the administrative point of view, voting rights, administration, capacity building, it's a huge thing. It's a very complex system of decision making within the European Union. And when we are talking about 6 more countries to join in, then it's a complex situation. And if these countries are not matured enough in terms of capacities and institutions, then it's even harder. It's that much hard that it could jeopardize the complete functioning of the European Union. I think this is the realistic reason why this is not why the European Union was not so enthusiastic about the enlargement. But things are changing. The things are changing very fast on the continent and on the globe. And of course, we have now war on the continent. I think that we should have a little bit more risk in terms of the enlargement, watching from the point of view of the European member states, and that we have to find ways. I'm not sure what could be the best solution in terms of formalities on steps, but we have to find a way, because it is a question of security and stability of the whole Europe, and it is a question of good transformative process that will take place in all of these countries who are waiting to join the European Union. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would like to turn to Dr. Müsenbacher. I mean, you have quite a different perspective, obviously, on this region. You're looking at it from the point of view of a bank, a very important actor in the financial sector. If you're looking at it purely from a business point of view, why should the EU have a number of rather poor economies and integrate them, right? I mean, this creates lots of opportunities, but it also creates costs. So, and this is obviously, you were saying it too, I mean, this is one of the reasons for the skepticism, is that there's a fear that the costs might be too big. So, but you are present in all these countries. So tell us, why is this nevertheless desirable to have these countries closer?
Well, my way of thinking is, you know, we start moving across the border as Raiffeisen already 40 years ago. So even before the Iron Curtain was demolished and brought down. So our first country to go to was Hungary in 1986. So we did not think about, you know, costs and political cohesion. For us, it was just obvious that this must be a politically obvious step. We are acting in many countries. We are acting in 12 countries. We are serving 19 million different clients, and 5 out of them are EU members. And this was always our strategic belief, that there is a political cohesion, that hopefully our neighboring countries may become members of the EU. So for me, the benefits completely outweigh costs, because then we have a common approach to certain regulations, to certain rules, and in the end. If I have to go with local regulations, this is much more cumbersome and painful compared if I can use more or less a common rule book. I recognize clearly that there are many countries, and also Bosnia, very much already being in line when it comes to these rules and regulation. So why not also accepting this effort? Why not also accepting these efforts and say, well, if you invest in Bosnian sovereigns, why can't we also have a zero risk weight when it comes to Bosnian sovereigns, e.g.? So for me, my answer is very clear. This was always our strategic belief or hope that we see this migration and this cohesion and the other things, the benefit clearly outweigh the costs of such an integration. I do, of course, accept that at the same time, as it was said, to build up the infrastructure and to meet these access criteria is a hell of a work by the country. But for me, from a business point of view, I believe that the benefits clearly outweigh the costs for all of us. And let me make one more point, because when arriving here, for me this was so important also, and it was mentioned on this stage, the geopolitical dimension must not be underestimated. In Serbia, for instance, 32% of the FDIs is coming from China. And you said, sir, that if the cohesion is not progressing, the gap will be filled by someone else. And I think we had this very strong impulse in 2014. Everyone is talking now about the war, but as I said, 2014, we already have seen the war, so let's move.
And I mean, the geopolitical aspect is, of course, highly interesting. I mean, you're a risk specialist, right? I mean, so on the one hand, you have this regulatory level that makes working easier. But I mean, to what extent do you see this in terms of investment climate now? You know, has this like changed with the geopolitical situation becoming aggravated in the region, or is that something you don't really notice?
No, absolutely. But, you know, usually as is, the way how I have been trained and educated is, you know, you do a hell of calculations in. But let me not walk away in this one. So what is, if we jointly accept that there is this new geopolitical truce, could this not also be one opportunity for us? Do we really have to get all the goods delivered by China? Or could we not make use of the capacity and the knowledge and people and highly skilled and educated people across the regions? So the term used for it is nearshoring. So accepting this geopolitics, but also to find for the mitigation. And one of the mitigation for me is this nearshoring. Hey, this is a big continent with competent people, so let's also make use of this geopolitical threat and getting a little bit less dependent on certain supply chains. And I think that the region perfectly would qualify for this. And we have seen it. We have seen it, you know, if you look, for instance, here in Romania, but also on other countries which are now in this accession status, I think that they would be a cool contributor to EU and to mitigate part of this geopolitics. Because if you talk about geopolitics, you could think about, you know, how much is China investing in these countries, but you could also think about how much these countries could contribute to the EU via their nearshoring and via their capacity.
Professor Kalik, I'm sorry for letting you wait so long, but I think it's great because you have an analytical and maybe also a very long-term look on this region. So if you see what has been happening in the last 2.5 years, in the last 10 years, we talked about various benchmarks now. Where do you see the decisive moments? Do you see that 2022 has really provided a decisive impulse for getting Western Balkans closer to Europe? Or would you say there's maybe other aspects that we're not really looking at enough?
Well, when the whole process started after the Kosovo War and when the Thessaloniki Summit happened in 2003, there was a lot of optimism because the Yugoslav war had ended. Slobodan Milosevic left power, there was regime change in Serbia, and relations in the region seemed to normalize. But then, shortly afterwards, the situation worsened. A number of crises were mentioned. There was a big financial crisis as well back in 2008. And most importantly, we saw Russia change its role, because don't forget that the Yugoslav war ended with support and active support and a rather constructive role of Russia supporting UN Security Council resolutions, supporting the Dayton Agreement, and so on and so forth. But then in 2008, when Kosovo became independent and NATO enlarged to southeastern Europe, with Croatia becoming a member and Albania, and then afterwards other countries, Russia really got alienated and took the role of a spoiler in the whole process. We see this with Russian propaganda today, but we have seen this at international level, at the UN level. Russia is fighting the role of the High Representative, the institution in Bosnia, and the whole peace process in the region. And then, of course, the Kosovo War, the war in the Ukraine started 2 years ago, which had a disastrous effect in the region because old fears were revitalized and trauma, so people are getting afraid that, you know, the war might come back to the region as well. The war in Ukraine has a disastrous economic effect in the region. We see inflation, we see dependency on energy, growth rates are declining, and all the problems that go along. And we see, in consequence, also new ethnic tensions. We have seen this in Kosovo recently, but we see problems in Bosnia and Herzegovina as well. And to make things worse, we talked about this this morning, the European Union, which does not speak with one voice to the region. There are different views. There's bilateralism. We heard about Northern Macedonia this morning. We listened to the Hungarian minister. That's a lot of bilateralism, and this means that the transformative power of the EU integration process has much lost in attractiveness, and I see a lot of disappointment in the region, frustrations, and therefore the EU has lost, I think, a lot of credibility in the region and of transformative power. We have seen elections in Europe, in the United States. Populist movements are getting stronger, anti-European movements, and there's a strong spirit in many European countries that argue against future enlargements. And as was mentioned before, in this kind of, limbo situation, we see new competitors. China was mentioned, Russia, but there are also the Islamic states getting influence. Re-Islamization is taking grounds, and unfortunately the European Union is well aware of all these challenges and threats, but we don't see any concrete recipes and strategies to counter all these new challenges.
Perhaps also, and it's overwhelmed by them to a certain extent. Maybe the strength is just not enough.
Definitely, it's probably overwhelmed, but as has been said before, it's all a question of political will. And at the end of the day, it's a question of political will, not only in Brussels, but in member states. And this brings us back to the question of how decision-making is being made in the European Union and single European states.
Mm. Would you say that the geopolitical decision to link the Western Balkan accession and the Eastern European accession, even if this is not explicitly stated, but of course there is a link, was that a mistake because they're just too multifaceted, the problems and issues that you have in these two regions?
It depends on from which angle you look at the problem. If you look from the side of the Ukraine problem, it was probably a good idea to make this political statement and give the signal that the Ukraine is becoming part, or has a European perspective as well. But I believe from the perspective of the Balkan countries, it's rather disastrous, because it will mean that the whole Ukraine problem and the Russian politics will take the Western Balkans hostage for their own processes. And I believe there's a lot of hope that the whole process is being revived, but when it comes to practical terms, it will bring a lot of open questions. Integration, such a big country like the Ukraine, and adding not only a few smaller and less problematic Western Balkan countries, but a huge country torn in the middle of a war and with all the problems that come along.
Deputy Minister Brkic, I mean, this question of ethnic tension, of various actors, you know, using this situation, that's of course something that is not foreign to you from a Bosnian perspective. Would you say the war since 2022 has increased this tension? Has this increased the problems that you also have domestically in Bosnia that are probably also to an extent imported from outside?
If there is one cohesive policy within the Bosnia and Herzegovina, that's the European path of my country. Regardless of what constituent people do you participate, or being all of the three constituent people, both entities and the entire state is supporting the EU path of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now, true, it's going to be used as the, you know, collateral or as the captive for some internal domestic purposes. But once again, when it's said that this is for the Brussels future of Bosnia and Herzegovina, this finds common political ground. 10 years ago, we did not have different players, not only in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but in the entire region. Today, we have a representative of one entity within the Bosnia and Herzegovina participating in BRICS in Kazan. More showing to be important in this platform than to take as the alternative for the pro-European politics. In terms of integration, there is no alternative for all of the countries of the region. But alternative we live right now. And this is the alternative of everlasting day, where we don't see the moment where we can, you know, peacefully or comfortably go to sleep because we ended our job in the terms of the integration. Thirds, which are within the Bosnia and Herzegovina and the region-wide, were there from economic reasons, ideological reasons, or pure political reasons that can mental in this pro-European policies that all the countries are having. I'll give you one example. In many of the countries, if not all, we have a very strong Chinese economical presence. They are not selling the ideology. I was, growing up in the socialist country, and I know that the communism as the ideology is something that, does not bring the best results. But economically wise, they are there. And using the opportunities for their deeper enrootment in order to get the big businesses or in order to get the big infrastructural works within the entire region, which is, by the way, paid by your own money. EBRD, EIB, all other financial institutions are there present, and they're, offering the financing of much needed infrastructural development of the entire region. But then, the cream is being wiped by the Chinese companies. Why? Because we are following what the Brussels was said in front of us, that cheapest economical offer must be validated to this extent. And then when I have a political consultations with the European External Action Service, then they say, oh, you have a lot of Chinese companies doing business in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Why don't you? How come that for the company from, I don't know, Shanghai has an interest of doing business in Mostar on the highway, and the companies from European Union don't? So it's a matter that really we do need something palpable in terms of the concrete integration process for us, Bosnia and Herzegovina. That would be celebrating the first IGC Intergovernmental Conference, something what Moldova and Ukraine did in June this year, to do it by the end of the Hungarian presidency. And overall support within the constituent people in Bosnia and Herzegovina is for the European Union still 78%, meaning that it's lower than it was 2 years before, but still hanging very strong in this support.
I would also like to ask you about this, because I mean, Montenegro is a country that has had its experience with Chinese investments in 2014 as well, highly problematic episode. But also now you have a lot of a very strong Russian presence in the country, on the coast, for example, real estate. Is this also this geopolitical aggravation of the whole region? Is this a risk for a small country like you that has probably also been open to various sides on some level? I'm speaking as a Swiss person, where, you know, we've also have had a lot of money from various places. But is this also a problem for a country like yours?
Well, actually not. Even the fact that Montenegro is really a small country, the census that we got, the results of the census a couple of days ago, showed that we don't have as many Russian people as we thought that it was, and it was the invasion like a couple years ago. Yes, there was one of the wave where we had a lot of people from Russia that came to Montenegro, bought a lot of real estate on the coast of Montenegro, but the things are changing. They are really selling it at the moment, and at this moment we have a lot of people also from the Ukraine. Some of them are also still living and working in Montenegro that came from Russia as well. When it comes to the Chinese influence and when it comes to the investors and everything else, I always speak that Montenegro should promote as a country which has a greatest potential, because it is really in the heart of the Western Balkans, with a great coast, with a great port that we have in Bar, and the greatest potential not only as a touristic destination, but also to invest in other fields. So that's also not only for the Montenegro, but also for the European Union. Like Josip said, there are a lot of things and the money that are coming from the EU. But once we have these open calls and the applications and tenders through the public procurement and all the laws that are submitted through the Montenegrin law, actually, when we open call for example, for the second half of the highway now, we didn't get any of the EU companies applied. So these are also the things where the EU should stand with the Western Balkan countries as well, because we everything do with the procedures, with the laws, with the public procurement, which is 100% aligned with the EU standards. So in that way, the good thing is also that we have investors and the companies from the EU that can go through this procedure with us, and then in that way we won't have any of the Chinese, Turkey or Bangladesh or Russia companies that are coming to the Western Balkan countries. I'm not speaking now only about the Montenegro, because from our side we are very open as a small market and as a small country, we are very open to have European money actually, and this is one of the good things of this gradual integration when we speak about the economics as well. And I must say, and I'm really proud on the team that we also finished the application for SEPA, which is also something that is very important from the EU perspective, also not only from Montenegro as well. So in that way, we are moving to the EU, but also from the EU, we need a feedback.
No. I would love to address this question to Mr. Erlich and to Mr. Müsenbacher before we go to the final round, and maybe it's a complicated issue, but why is this investment not more forthcoming than from EU countries? We've heard this complaint now from various sides. So what's your perspective is this different in Croatia? Have you solved this problem by EU membership, that Europeans are more willing to invest? And what reasons do you see? Maybe you can start.
Of course, I mean, we see the difference right now when we enter the European Union regarding the foreign direct investments in general, I would say, from all over the globe. Let's say I'll give you one example, but I think that the even more effect on that was joining the Eurozone and the Schengen right now for Croatia. One example of a big investment that happened right now in Croatia, and that it wouldn't be happening in Croatia if we weren't the part of the European Union and the Euro and Schengen, was the big investment recently happened in Osijek, in Slavonia, in less developed region of Croatia, where Jabil company, it's a high-tech company from USA that was scanning the territory of the Western Balkan and other countries and decided to join and to invest a big factory in Osijek recently. So it's very recently. It was not even a month ago. It was opened the big factory. This was something that happened to us because of this integration. So I think that when you are part of the European Union, then it is easier to monitor and to line in with the regulations of a single market. This is why it's not a question, well, what is the problem with the Russian capital or the Chinese capital within, I don't know, Serbia, Montenegro and other countries outside of the European Union. If they become the member states, then they're part of the single market, then they're part of the regulations of the European Union regulations. And in this term, European Union can be a much more competitive player in this respect. This is how I see the situation. Yeah.
Would you like to add something?
Well, from my point of view, we as Raiffeisen, we have invested into the region, so we are being part of these FDI statistics. The second one is, and I think you, sir, again made the point, we are also co-financing locally with the EBRD. So if there is a new infrastructure to be around the corner, of course they have to go, the one who would like to build this infrastructure has to look for financing. It's EBRD and some other institutions we are co-financing. But I have no say. Who should be one delivering the infrastructure. And I think it goes back to our basic understanding. So we co-finance the EBRD and others, but who is then delivering the development is in the discretion, following the rules of the EU, of the one who is asking for this development. So 2 points: we are investing into in the region via our FDIs, but at the same time we are co-financing. Who finally gets then the development contract? This is in the discretion of the respective, is it government or local government?
So we're almost at the end, and we have time for one extremely short last round. And of course, I'm going to ask you a really difficult question that you will have to answer in one sentence. So I would like to know, how do you see it likely that the EU will have the power to make this big expansion round, that these countries will join the EU? And how long will it take? When will the next EU member join? Please, I'll start with you, Mr.
Well, better sooner than later, I would say. But it's hard for me to say when. But I think it's a must go goal. There's no alternative to this. When you see the map of Europe, and then when you see where are these countries, it's the heart of Europe. So basically, they are already within the territory of the Union, but they are not member states as such. So they have to become member states as soon as possible. We have to use this right now sense of all the member states that the enlargement is a top priority, and we have to keep on going and find the ways on how to deal with the situations within each country on doing reforms. What is it that we can do to solve their reforms, to build their institutions to join properly in faster manner? For my opinion, I would be advocating for even faster procedures, even with less ready, I would say, in institutional capacities area, but just to when they have the feeling that they will, if we come up with a offer that's realistic from the point of European Union to the applicant state, I think that things will keep on moving very fast. We have to fast it on that way.
Yeah. Please, a very brief answer.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's not only a date, it's really a plan how to finish this process. And when it comes to Montenegro, we have a very plan which is not only for Montenegro's side, but also with European Commission when it comes to the closing chapters. So by the end of 2026, we are going to close all the chapters. And by the end of 2028, we can be and will be the next member state of the European Union.
Very clear, thank you. Please.
We shouldn't forget that the countries in the region have to do some homework as well. It's not just a question of the European Union, but the countries in the region have to deliver on certain processes and conditions. Some countries are more advanced, some are less behind. Bosnia-Herzegovina is one where they're of particular concern of the European Union in Brussels. And if you read the country reports, you see a lot of deficiencies in many, many aspects, including judicial sector, investment climate, and so on and so forth. So we shouldn't blame the European Union only for not delivering, but also ask the countries of the region to move ahead. I'm not aware of any conflict or problem in the region that could not be solved with a little bit of political will, including Kosovo, including the Bosnian transformation process. So please don't forget that the countries have to do some homework. And when it comes to the European Union, it's not a question of dates, but of linking two important processes, namely enlargement with internal reform. I don't believe that many countries can join unless the European Union makes the political decision to reform itself.
Thank you very much.
Well, listening to this panel and to the pre-speakers, it seems that the political will is given. Ambition is also clearly confirmed. Economically, it makes sense. So let's at least fix a date with the ones who would like to access and not keep them waiting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, the days or months ahead of us are going to be, more clear. I agree with the professor saying that we should do some more grease elbow in all of our reforms in all of the countries. But not forget, North Macedonia changed the name. Nothing happened. So when it comes to the integrity, it goes both ways. And this is something what I say to my colleagues in the Brussels, not to open debate on this. We have to do a lot of reforms there. But we'll see, is 2030 going to be the date, what was mentioned, for the political readiness of the absorption capacity of the EU and reform readiness for all of the countries, which are, in my belief, be one or another big bang enlargement that is going to happen. And we'll see also in the forthcoming days how the budget of the EU is going to look like. No money, no enlargement. If it's going to be envisaged significant amount within the upcoming budget of the EU, then we can expect the enlargement somewhat at the end of the multi-annual financial framework of the EU.
Thank you very much to all participants, and I would suggest we give a warm applause for this very interesting conversation. Thank you very much.